Coastal North Carolina is unique because we have a really large, complex system of barrier islands and estuaries, sounds, shallow water habitats that you really don't see in combination at that scale many other places in the world. Living shorelines can be a broad term, but the definition I kind of like to use is one that essentially encompasses living and non-living components, so things like marsh grasses, oysters combined with some kind of breakwater structure, a structure intended to mitigate erosion or wave energy, to provide coastal protection. But the key is that there's a continuum maintained between the land and the sea in terms of organisms and water flow. We are lucky in coastal North Carolina that we still have a lot of living shorelines naturally occurring, salt marshes and oyster reefs. However, as we've had more people move to the coast, want to own waterfront property, but also want to be protected from hurricanes and ultimately in the long-term sea level rise, people have felt the need to harden their shoreline, and usually that involves installing a wall. And so those are not structures that kind of maintain that continuum from land to sea. It's an abrupt disruption between the terrestrial habitat and the subtidal or marine habitat.
This is an intertidal system, and so oysters are going to grow based on where the tide is coming up. So we're trying to do a little bit of sampling all around these structures. So kind of a high and a low, a landward and a seaward, ends versus middle, try to capture the full variability that you might see on the structures. The Phaedra is basically going to go.
So we're trying to kind of recover services lost. When I say services, like ecosystem services, things like habitat for marine organisms, water quality benefits, natural sediment stabilization, by restoring things like salt marshes and oyster reefs. And so we're essentially trying to bring those natural barriers back in combination with one another. And that is the kind of the true living shoreline you would see in coastal North Carolina, are these combined salt marsh, oyster reef seascapes.
So what you're seeing right now is we are at this living shoreline at low tide, which means you can have a great view of what the different elements are. If you look out towards the water, you'll see the rock sill, which is staggered to allow water to come in, which allows animals and nutrients to be able to flow in and out of this living shoreline. And then behind the rock sill, you'll see this beautiful marsh grass growing up and becoming this thriving ecosystem right here. A living shoreline like this is really important because it's helping to protect our shorelines, and it's also helping to protect our infrastructure that's behind our shorelines. And as we have increased storms, increased water levels, increased rainfall, it's going to be really important that we think about how to make more resilient coastal communities. The good news here in North Carolina is that about 4 years ago, the state updated the permitting process, and it is much easier and more streamlined now to install a living shoreline on your property. So we've gotten over that hurdle, but we still don't have maybe as many people putting in living shorelines as we would like, and it's probably a matter of educating people, doing more outreach, making sure that marine contractors are aware of the need for living shorelines, and also teaching marine contractors how to build a living shoreline.
We felt like we needed to design a course that would tell people in North Carolina, whether they're property owners, marine contractors, or someone who wants to enter the workforce with a specific set of skills, how to build a living shoreline here in North Carolina. What are the materials available, the designs, and more importantly, what research there has been done to kind of feed into their effectiveness and how to make good decisions when designing these types of shorelines. That's something that, as a researcher, I do the science a lot, but I don't feel like I had the opportunity so far to translate into something really applicable and useful for your day-to-day, say, marine contractor or even a waterfront property owner.
The researchers at East Carolina University are out there studying the most up-to-date techniques on living shorelines so that they can help inform the class material so residents and participants in the class can learn about what is the most up-to-date information about living shorelines, and vice versa. The class participants can actually pose questions and needs to the researchers so that they're aware of what is needed on the ground in North Carolina. How can their research help inform the questions that our residents and homeowners and marine contractors are asking when they're trying to decide how to install living shoreline on their property.
In the last decade, our ability to collect data, high resolution data on shorelines, is just kind of exploded with the use of drones, where we would have to go into the field and walk and collect point by point by point to get things like elevation of the marsh or to collect even densities of oysters. We are now seeing that we can start to do that with drones. I think we're going to be able to fill in some research gaps in terms of dynamic shoreline change, kind of year to year and even seasonal changes in shorelines that might alleviate some of the concerns that property owners have. They might observe, I think my shoreline is eroding, or I think that storm had impacts, where previously assessing that would have been extremely labor intensive, and I would have had to plan ahead, get out there before the storm and after. Now that so much of the shoreline is being flown by drones, mapped by remote sensing satellite data, we might actually be able to answer a lot of those questions without that additional labor. We hope that by demonstrating performance of different types of shoreline structures over time, we can convince people that, this is an alternative. I think Sea Grant has always had played a really important role in funding research on our coastal resources, not only for faculty members like myself, but in the grad student funding, the graduate fellowships that are available. A lot of our lab's work and other labs that work on living shorelines or marsh restoration or oyster restoration have been funded by Sea Grant. And so we have been particularly lucky in North Carolina to have that be a priority for funding over the last at least decade or two, if not longer.
There is a demand for knowledge about living shorelines in North Carolina, and we want to offer as much information and resources as we can to help people put in these living shorelines, whether it's on their own personal property or whether they're going to hire a marine contractor to help them. We are very excited to offer this Living Shoreline Academy here at Carteret Community College, and we hope that this class, once it is fully developed, that we can transfer to other community colleges around coastal North Carolina, and that they will be able to teach it in other locations around the coast as well. But stay tuned, because that might be a few years down the road.